For centuries, rulers have poured fortunes into building massive fortresses, thinking those walls would keep them in power. But what if I told you those walls were actually a huge liability? Today, we're diving into what one of history's most sharp-witted political thinkers, Niccolò Machiavelli, had to say about it. And trust me, his answer is not what you'd expect.
Okay, so just imagine for a second. You've done it. You've conquered a new state. The war is over. But your problems are just getting started. Now comes the really hard part. How do you actually hold on to what you've just won? How do you stop it all from slipping through your fingers?
While for ages, the go-to answer seemed pretty obvious. Build big, thick walls. Build fortresses. Even Machiavelli admits it's an age-old strategy for fending off attackers and having a safe place to hide. It just feels like common sense, right? But Machiavelli's real genius was in poking holes in what everyone else considered common sense.
He argued that before you even think about laying a single stone for a new fortress, you have to ask yourself a much more important, much more fundamental question. This is really the core of his whole analysis. It's like a litmus test for survival. Before you build that wall, before you raise an army, you have to get this one thing right. Because if you get it wrong, Machiavelli is pretty clear that every move you make is just going to speed up your own downfall. And here it is. This is the big one. Who do the ruler really fear more? Is the main threat coming from outside your borders? Foreign armies trying to invade? Or is the real danger coming from inside, from your own subjects who could rise up and tear you down? Because your answer to that question changes absolutely everything. All right, so with that test in mind, let's put the whole idea of a fortress on trial. Are these giant stone walls a brilliant defense, or are they just a massive, expensive mistake? Machiavelli doesn't beat around the bush. He gives us his verdict right up front. And it's one of his most famous lines ever. He basically says, sure, if you're more scared of your own people than of foreigners, then by all means, build fortresses. But his final conclusion, the real takeaway, is this. Your best fortress is not to be hated by the people. So why does he say that? His logic is, well, it's ruthless, but it's also brilliant. Think about it. If your own people hate your guts, a fortress isn't a defense. It's a cage you've built for yourself. He argues that those stone walls are totally useless if the people rise up, because they will just go find a foreign power to come help them. And in his words, they'll never be short of foreign support. Suddenly, that fortress you built for security becomes the ultimate symbol of your oppression, which just makes them want to get rid of you even more. Now, to really hammer this point home, Machiavelli tells a great real-world story about the Countess of Forlì, a woman named Caterina Sforza. And at first, her story seems to prove that fortresses totally work. Her husband gets murdered by rebels, she manages to escape into her fortress, holds out against them, and eventually gets her state back with the help of her allies. A clear win for the fortress, right? Well, not so fast. A few years down the road, the infamous Cesare Borgia comes knocking, and he attacks her state. But this time, things were different. The people of Forlì, they couldn't stand Caterina. And what do you think they did? They opened the gates and sided with the foreign invader, Borgia. And here's the kicker. Her fortress was, in Machiavelli's own words, not much use. Her entire defense completely collapsed from the inside out. He concludes she would have been a heck of a lot safer if she just focused on not being hated by her people instead of trusting in stone walls. It's the perfect example. The loyalty of the people is a far stronger defense than any wall you could ever build. And here's the thing. This core idea, that the people's support is everything, it doesn't just apply to fortresses. Machiavelli uses this exact same test to judge pretty much every classic strategy for holding on to power. For example, what about arming your subjects? For a new ruler, Machiavelli says this is a great move. Why? Because giving people weapons makes them loyal. It makes them feel like they're on your team. Taking those weapons away, that just shows you don't trust them, and it breeds hatred. Okay, what about stirring up factions to keep a city divided and weak? Seems clever, right? Nope. Machiavelli says that's a sign of weakness. The second a real enemy shows up, that divided city will fold like a house of cards. And what about picking a fight with an enemy just so you can crush them for a PR win? Machiavelli actually thinks this is a brilliant move, if you're sure you can win. It's a great way to build your reputation. You see the pattern, right? Every single one of these strategies is judged by one simple standard. Does it make the people love you, or does it make them hate you? So after all this talk of walls and weapons and political schemes, we finally get to Machiavelli's ultimate conclusion. What's the one defense that will actually last? So, after all the analysis, all the historical examples, we land right back where we started, with Machiavelli's most powerful piece of advice. The real foundation of all security, the one thing a ruler has to put above everything else, is the goodwill of the people.
In the end, Machiavelli's message is crystal clear. A ruler who is hated will always be vulnerable, no matter how high their walls are. Real, lasting power isn't built from stone and mortar. It's built from the support and the loyalty of the very people you govern. That, right there, is the only fortress that can never, ever be breached.
Now, Machiavelli was writing 500 years ago about castles and swords, but his central point feels more relevant than ever. Which kind of begs the question for us, doesn't it? In our world of social media, 24/7 news, and public opinion, what does a ruler's fortress even look like today?
If you enjoyed this summary and want to explore the complete book, you'll find the link in the description below. Thank you so much for watching, and happy reading.